hear me say hello? Many of you have an iPhone. I'm sure you probably all thought it was your phone ringing. I told you guys, every single time I get on microphone, every time, bar none, phone rings. I could go all day without, and I did. The phone didn't ring all day. Not once. I worked all day outside, phone did not ring once. And as soon as I got on, the phone rang. So crazy. It's just the weirdest freaking thing. And they really say turn off all your devices before you get online because or before you get on and do a video because it can it can break right in. But I'm glad this person called me because um, look, I got something to say. And this addresses somebody in the chat. I'm not going to mention your name because I don't want you to freak out. But if you're talking about violence, you need to go because I practice much love, and much love means there will be no violence on our end ever, even if that means going down. So, I mean, that's all I gotta say. Don't preach violence. Don't talk anything violent in here about doing violent things to people because that's what they do. And how can you do what they do? How could you resort to being what they do just to get? There is no amount of force you can use to change people's minds. But just think about this: the Nazis couldn't do it. The Romans couldn't do it. You cannot. The church couldn't do it. Religion can't do it. You cannot force someone to change their mind. You have to change their freaking hearts. Which means finding some soft spot, which everyone has, even the hardest person, and breaking through to it with truth. Whatever, and sometimes that truth is the Bohemian Grove, sometimes it's science, sometimes it's something crazy that happens, a shared experience, but whatever it is, that's the way you're going to change the hearts and minds of all the people. You can't kill all the people, and you can't extract revenge on all the people because there's always going to be a new line of people to extract revenge against because everybody's bad. It's just a matter of degrees of badness. There's people that say, oh, I'm a good person. Oh, really? Good by whose standards? Really? Because, if we're going to be judging good and bad, then we have to go by a greater standard of what is good and bad. And then you go and look and see everybody down to a 1-year-old's bad. Seriously, as soon as a kid starts grabbing other kids' stuff and becoming selfish, they've become bad too, and that happens at an age of 1. So when it comes to goodness and badness, I would have to say that overall, come on. But we're not here to get a lecture from Dutch on that, are we? But I've got to comment on it because if it's getting said in here, then we got to understand the difference. And so I'm not going to ban anybody unless they start threatening actual people. But if you're talking killing people and hurting people and stuff, dude, do you realize where you are? You are in the much love chat room, which is you've got to practice it when you don't want to. It's the hardest fucking thing in the world, dude, when you're getting attacked by somebody and you've got to not attack back. Where the best thing you can do is drop a F-bomb. And even then you should feel guilty about it. For real. It's hard. It's the hardest damn thing I've ever had to do in my life to actually live up to what I preach. Because if I'm going to preach much love and it's all my videos, I remind myself of this sometimes when I'm sitting here screaming. Okay? I'm real, guys. I'm sitting here screaming. Wow, la, 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 la. And I freak out because it's my livelihood on the line when this stuff happens. My reputation online, my God, my name has been ruined. When you see your name in print on CBS News and you know that there's no way you'll ever get that taken down, it opens up a whole new level of you just don't imagine how you would feel if you saw your name for anything listed, for anything, and you call them to get it taken down, and they don't. Oh boy, oh boy. But I'm doing it for what? Well, for you guys, for what I know is true, for science, and basically for the discoveries that I've made, for the sake of scientific discovery, for all the guys who came before me who had to go through this shit. And eventually they will wake up to what I'm showing with seismic forecasting, for instance. And they already did with HAARP rings. I mean, the military didn't just do HAARP ring experiments on their own, guys. They did HAARP ring experiments because there was a person online talking about HAARP rings. And then they did the experiments to find out if it was true. That's huge, right? I mean, that's huge. So everything that I like to do, everything that I do online is for a reason. It intrigues me. It just makes sense to me that of doing this. So that's why I'm in here now. So now that we addressed that, I'd like to just go into, I guess, the Q&A. And to Sunshine, I will call you back. It looks like maybe the call dropped, or maybe you had hung up and just were letting me know what's going on. But I will, after I get done doing Q&A. Okay, good. I'm glad to see the person that I was talking to got what I'm talking. I'm not trying to be a dick either. You know what I mean? Like, I understand that people get worked up and they want to take action and they want to do something. But the thing you want to do is to be that kind, loving person in the face of that police state cop that's coming in. I'm from Ferguson, guys. Ferguson, Missouri. I saw my hometown burned down by rioting idiots screaming about democracy. And I saw the police state roll in. They were just dying for that. They were just waiting for it. Oh yeah, the cops love that shit. So they're just waiting for that. That gives them the excuse to roll in the police state. So you get violent, look what happens. All of a sudden, every special interest group in the world turns out. The Communist frickin' Front was here. Dudes in black scarves waving red flags with stars on them, screaming about communism, and they are marching down the streets of my motherfucking hometown, Ferguson, Missouri. And then they all freaking showed up and they were paid pets, no doubt about it, showed up with Molotov cocktails and burned car dealerships and burned down the freaking grocery store, and they raided all the stores. That's what we get, okay? Because, again, there's so many of these groups that are looking to pile onto that kind of stuff, and all it takes is, and they try to instigate it too. Don't get me wrong, the government will try and, the Bundy Ranch and all that stuff, trying to lure people up to a bird refuge and stuff. That was all, all that stuff. It's all an attempt to try and get people to get up in arms and get violent, because they got that angle covered. You wouldn't believe the weapons they have. If you think that the bullets, if you think bullets and missiles are what they're using now, wow. You would be blown away to hear what they're developing and what they're getting ready to roll out on all the aircraft and all the ships and everything like that. It's just next generation shit's getting ready to roll out that's got the whole battlefield covered. So the days of fighting that fight are over, and that's good, because now we're in the 21st century. The next fight is for the mind. It's a mind fight. It's a mind game. That's what it's all about. So that's why, again, when I'm going through it with science, it's a mind game. And they win sometimes. I mean, I don't win them all, but I come back blazing every time with like Mount Dutch and HAARP rings, and every time they beat me down, I always spring back up and respond with some new discovery or some breakthrough shit happens. Every single time. And that's what's going to happen this time too. I'm on the downswing, but that's okay. I've got beat down. I'm used to it. I've been beat down by big oil, big gas, big energy. I mean, you want to name it, the National Weather Service, Storm Prediction Center, USGS, IRIS, professors, just the whole freaking crew has come against me. It's been awesome. And like a prize fighter, sometimes you get totally wrecked along the way. And you got to remember what you're fighting for. And so that's why I'm back here now. I could have given up. It would be easy. Anybody else would have given up at this point, guys. When they, after everything that I've been through, I've seen it. I've seen too many other channels crumble. You wonder why I'm like one of the only ones still sticking around after 6 years. Go back 6 years. Who else is there every day for 6 years? Nobody. They're like all these other people just disappeared. There's other people that showed up after me, but from before, maybe a few makeup review channels and video game channels, but like other people in the community. What, Alex Jones? Really? So, all right, well, let's get into the Q&A. All right, so the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it a little different this time. I've got a window open, a separate window, which I should be able to click on, I hope, and stop it, and then just manually scroll down and answer questions one by one. So right now I'm seeing a real-time chat view where I'm seeing a bunch of smiley faces going by. Dutch, can you update on the Midwest and tell me if you can see anything for Ohio from BL Bowie 2? Okay, that's where I'm going to start answering the questions. Okay, so we'll start with that question right there. And if people want to put their questions into the chat after I'm done answering this question, and I'll just scroll down and try to answer. I'm going to miss some. I won't get to all of them. It's kind of be like a TV or radio show where they just take callers as they call in, and if you're hit or miss, that kind of thing. Because we're going to set up a place where you guys can actually submit a question, and it'll be much easier for me to go through and then just pick out the questions and answer them one by one, print them out, read people's names, that kind of stuff. But we'll get into Bowie's question first. This is a really good, actually, really good question. Ohio. Ohio, in case you're from outside of the United States or you're in the U.S. and you don't know where Ohio is. Ohio's right here where my mouse is, the state right here. And we've got Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, and New York, Pennsylvania, New York up here, Pennsylvania here, West Virginia here, Kentucky here, Michigan up here, okay, just for reference, all right? Great Lakes all around it here. Now, look where Ohio resides on the eastern edge of what is called the Craton. I've explained the Craton before many times, and I've shown the graphic of it, but I'll just back it out here and move my mouse along the line of where the Craton exists. You'll notice that it exists right along the edge of the mountain ranges where we see a rise occur. I don't know if you guys have ever driven across the United States, but once you hit Kansas, it's a steady rise from about 1,000 feet all the way up to when you get to Denver, which is 5,280 feet, 1 mile high, the Mile High City in Denver. I used to live there. Well, the drive across Kansas is an impressive one. There's long ranges where you drive up for 50 miles at a time, and the incline is a 25, 35 degree angle. I mean, we're talking a steep incline for 50 miles. Well, the rise that occurs there is along the edge of the Craton that extends up into the Midwest, and it's the interior edge. It's the portion that hasn't moved in, well, according to their standards, hundreds of millions of years, and put that in quotes, time. And we could debate the whole time thing another day, but we'll get into that later. The mountain ranges, of course, to the west, the Intercontinental Divide up through Colorado, down through New Mexico, up into Wyoming. But the fracking operations exist along the interior edge of the Craton. So right through here, right where the rise is occurring, all the way up into Kansas, down through all of Oklahoma, south through Dallas, Texas, south of Dallas, all the way around through Texas, going west into Fort Stockton, and then curling back up the mountain ranges in northern New Mexico at the New Mexico-Colorado border here, going up through western Colorado at Colbrand, and eastern Colorado near Greeley, and even as far south as North Denver, by my old house, for instance, fracking wells, and 128th in Colorado, in Thornton, Colorado, and North Denver, you've got fracking operations. So on either side of the mountain range, going up into Wyoming, where there's other fracking operations all throughout southern Wyoming, up to Yellowstone almost. Now, as I'm talking here, a 2.1 just struck out at Mammoth Mountain, which is a volcano out in eastern California, out west. But let me carry on. So the fracking operations extend across the mountain ranges to the west. Well, they also extend across the operations extend to the east. And Ohio is one of the locations where the fracking operations are. And they were starting to drill pretty excessively starting in 2010, going into 2011. And then you started to see earthquakes develop in Ohio that reached up into the 4.0 range. It drew a lot of attention on the East Coast because it was really unexpected. And the reason that occurred is because the pressure was coming from the West Coast and transferring to the East Coast up the edge of the Craton and it was hitting that weak spot that was being created there by the overpressurized wells. Luckily, Ohio took the warning signs at what they were, did not ignore the problem, and actually issued a moratorium on new drilling, drew down the well pressure by half on most of the wells across most of the state, and guess what happened? The earthquakes died out. There's still a few that occur there, but mainly the earthquake threat that exists now from in all the state of Ohio is from the fracking operations themselves. So now that they drew down the well pressure, now you can see over the past several months, years, there has been way less activity than what we first saw when they were doing the drilling. And that kicked up to, again, like I said, 4.0 earthquakes. Now the earthquakes are happening to the north-northeast naturally, like they should. When you look at this map here, I talked about the 3.3 that struck just a few days ago in South Ontario, just north of the Great Lakes. That's a natural earthquake pressure transfer earthquake up the edge of the craton on its way towards the east coast. That's natural, okay? So the earthquakes that were hitting in Ohio were unnatural. Humans were creating a pressure stop-off point there with the overpressurized wells. Wells fully pressurized. When pressure comes in from another angle, of course, that's too much pressure. That causes a fracture in the well casement, which then releases the gas and water under pressure, and that causes additional earthquakes. And if the earthquakes are large enough, they cause other wells to fracture, which then releases more gas and more water and causes more earthquakes. Luckily, the superfracture did not occur. The superfractures occur at that 5.0 range, I believe. We saw a superfracture occur in Oklahoma, also saw another superfracture occur in Arkansas, and a superfracture occur in South Colorado. All three locations swarmed out until they started to draw down well pressure. Now that they started to draw down well pressure at most of the wells that are experiencing these seismic events, that has then drawn back the earthquakes at the locations from thousands to hundreds. Now it's still occurring, as you can see on the map here now. 3.2 striking in Oklahoma at the fracking operations. Luckily for Ohio, Oklahoma is now absorbing most of that motion. As a matter of fact, for the last 2 to 3 years, Oklahoma, Kansas, North Texas, that's the location that's been receiving most of the pressure, releasing most of the pressure, and the rest transfers over to the east. First hits the New Madrid seismic zone, and it is New Madrid, not New Madrid. You can check with the locals in Missouri. And then the pressure, whatever's left over from here, goes up the east coast and releases in small earthquakes. The way that was panning out in 2011, it was becoming large earthquakes because there was large earthquakes to the west. There was 4 and 5.0 earthquakes interior on the coast over the past, in 2011, that led to that 4.0 activity in Ohio. So in Ohio right now, your earthquake threat is minimal. It's more to your south at the bend of the edge of the craton and all the way to the north at the relief spot. Pressure's going to find its weakest spot and it's going to transfer laterally up through the obvious mountain ranges. You can see the mountain ranges on the map here now. Those weren't created by glaciers. That's part of the craton itself. Uplift from down below has created that over a long period of time. In other words, geology got it all wrong 100%. But Ohio, you should be in the clear for now. At least if we see anything change, I'll be doing an update, of course. And if we see some kind of pressure starting to build in your neck of the woods, or if they start renewing fracking operations, then you might start to worry a little bit more. But right now, I think they got a handle on it. They were wise. I don't know who's there. It would be really interesting to see who the advisors in Ohio are and why they went one way with it when Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas didn't. They went the opposite way. And you can see what happened. The results of Ohio versus the people that ignored the problem down here in the Southwest and the people that paid attention to the problem up here in the Northeast. I think New York also paid attention to that issue. That may have been due to the Stop Fracking Artist movement where Yoko Ono and John Lennon's son, they got involved with the anti-fracking issue and actually I think stopped it up in New York to some extent, which is, wow, they got involved. So it would be good if other people got involved at this point. But at this point, there is no stopping the superfractures in Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas. Once it's broken, it's broken. It's like Humpty Dumpty. You cannot put it back together again. So like I said, Ohio, they made the right choice. Hope they don't go back on that. And if things change, I will do an update, let you know. All right. All right. Let's go down the list. Alex Jones. No comment on Alex Jones. Actually, Thomas Sims taking direct action against the wells. That's, I mean, I don't know what you're talking about, but that's not what would be wanted, I don't think. They have to reduce pressure at like overall at like a whole area, not just the wells that are actually being hit, but the 20, 30 wells around the entire incoming area where the pressure is coming in at. That seems fine. Okay. Dutch, your thoughts on the Cascadia subduction zone from Sea Voyager 45? Huh, that's a good question. Cascadia subduction zone. It is my contention that there is no subduction occurring. At all, never has, never will. Lateral movement, and that the curvature under the plate is actually a dome shape on the underside of the North American plate. And the dome shape would be coming up off the asthenosphere as pieces break off and go down into the asthenosphere. They're getting a reflection off a semi-solid, which is the upper layers of magma that they've mistaken for, I would assume, solid layers. And that the subduction theory doesn't pan out. The plates don't move in the way we thought they did. They actually are moving in the opposite direction. Africa and South America are moving towards each other. The United States and Europe are moving towards each other. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is not spreading. The Pacific Plate is actually rising. The United States rose out of the sea. So did Central America, South America, far north Canada. All of it rose out of the sea. Same with Europe, Africa, Asia, Russia, Australia. They all rose out of the sea. The sea was there first. First there was plasma. Then there was water. Well, actually, first there was plasma. Then the plasma field hit hydrogen and oxygen, which formed into water. Then that had weight, and that attracted rock, which fell down over time, hit these oceans, sank down to the bottoms of the empty oceans, and hit the plasma, melted, formed a cooled shell, which formed the multiple layers of rock that make up the crust of the Earth. And the shell cooled, hardened, cooled, melted, as pieces came in and flew into this big ball of water. Eventually, out of the ocean, the continents rose, and so the Pacific Plate is moving laterally, side by side, and that's why the San Andreas Fault and all these other fault zones are moving side by side. There is no subduction occurring because the mountains have always been there. Shoreline has always been there too. Same with out to sea, and we have evidence of that. There's no curvature, there's no subduction point, there's not an actual spot where it goes down underneath. That's all based upon underground soundings that I truly believe they got wrong. And that again, that they would base it upon a curvature underneath the plate, where they say that the Pacific Plate curls down underneath the North American Plate and subducts and recycles itself, and that the Mid-Atlantic Ridge somehow mysteriously spreads and is pushing us to the west. But that's not the case. We're actually being pushed to the east-southeast, and we have been for a very long time, as evidenced by the mountain ranges, which were not formed by glaciers, which they got wrong, and the volcanoes, which we looked at just the other night in the live stream that wasn't saved, shows that the whole southwest, tens of thousands of volcanoes, the inland sea that exists from Yellowstone up here all the way down to South New Mexico and South Arizona, back up through Utah and Salt Lake City, all the way west through Nevada, all the way north into Washington State, back down through Idaho, was all an inland ocean, which means that the continent rose out of the sea and trapped an inland ocean there. And Salt Lake City at least, and the Salt Lake that's there is the leftover remnants of whatever is the leftover of that inland ocean. the Grand Canyon formed in the exact opposite way than they said, that the flow out of the inland ocean is what caused the Grand Canyon to form, and that means the whole story that we were told is a 100% bogus lie from start to finish, which then calls into question everything that you know. So, I hope that answers the question. Okay, let's go down the list. Let's see. What do you think the biggest risk to the East Coast? I've been noticing movement in my area. It's going unreported. Coastal South Carolina. Oh. Okay. East Coast. Let's show everybody, if you don't know where Carolinas are. International audience. North and South Carolina. Georgia. Famous. You've heard of it. Florida down here to the south. This long peninsula. But these are the Carolinas here. We've got Virginia to the north. Kentucky. Tennessee. Alabama, Mississippi. Okay, so here in the southeast, look what's right here on the western portion of the state. See these mountain ranges? Scientists tell you that those mountain ranges were formed by glaciers over time. Now this is foolishness. Now, they were not formed by glaciers. They are the eastern edge of the unsubducted craton. The craton is pushed to the east, and the uplift that happens underneath you, this is the subject of a paper that just came out about 3 weeks ago, and it actually deals with Virginia and the large earthquake. Remember the 5.9 that struck in Virginia back in 2011? Well, they found out that portions of the underside of the plate of the craton are breaking off and falling down into the asthenosphere. And the asthenosphere, as I've said before, is just a fancy word for the melted magma down below the plate. So you can imagine the plate is breaking off underneath, chunks of the plate are falling down into the melted magma and disappearing off into the magma and probably melting themselves. Then magma comes back up to fill the pocket where the plate broke off. Whatever big chunk, small chunk, that upwelling magma causes new earthquakes to occur in Virginia and on the East Coast. It also causes the mystery booms, rumbles, and earthquakes all the way up to the northeast. But before all that occurs, we normally see the pressure come from the Midwest and go right across the South and right up through the Carolinas, Virginia, Georgia, North Georgia. There's a volcano right here where my mouse is. It's called Pigeon Mountain. There's been several earthquakes that struck there, and there's a company mining the volcano called Vulcan Mining Company. Okay, so there's a volcano there. It's right along the edge of the craton. It's right in your neck of the woods, so to speak, at least near South Carolina. And your earthquake threats, sometimes they don't report the earthquakes on the East Coast. It's almost a conspiracy. You can go check the actual charts. You'll see movement, but you won't see any earthquake appear on the feed. Now, this is a huge complaint of mine, because people quote me numbers all the time about earthquakes, whether or not there's more or less this year or last year, and they don't know what they're talking about, because in order for them to report an or to have that earthquake on their count, it has to appear on their USGS feed. If it's on a chart and it doesn't make it to the feed, to the actual list that you guys get, what good? I mean, it's like it never happened. It's like if a tree falls in the woods, does anybody hear it? Or does it make a sound? That's the same. If a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? Yes, it does make a sound, but there's nobody there to hear it. And it's kind of the same way with earthquakes. So I wouldn't be surprised. And the spot where we see along the coast, see, this ties in with the methane. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's large pockets of methane that are stored here along the edge of the plate. Now, methane is what they're pumping out at the fracking operations in the Midwest. There's more methane along the edge of the plate here. Again, evidence that the plate edge is not, it's not solid, that there's something pushing that plate, and the plate is actually in flux, and the plate is being pushed, most likely in the direction in which the sediment is being pressed. And if you look at this, it's being pressed to the east, not to the west. That the ridge is actually being pressed to the east along the edge of the plate, and sometimes that ridge breaks, that there's bubbles that break off, spots of methane that come up, and they say that might be the cause of the Bermuda Triangle missing boats and ships, that all these bubbles of methane come up and the ship sinks and the plane explodes, that kind of stuff. I don't know if I buy that story, but there is that amount of methane right off the shores of the Carolinas. So if there are small earthquakes striking there, they may not be reporting them because they may be methane related, methane releases, which would panic everyone. So they sometimes, of course, wouldn't tell the public about that. I can't really think of any other reason they would want to censor it other than we forecast it. And we see them censor earthquakes that are forecasted. No doubt about it. Every week, sometimes multiple times per week. It's almost as if they write down the list of earthquakes that we're forecasting, and if they strike there, they deliberately don't report them. Other agencies don't have a problem, though. All right, let's get over and answer another question. What do we got? Is California slowly moving up to Alaska after each big earthquake? Oh, well, you know what? This is another proof that that there is no subduction going on. Okay, we have the lateral fault zone movements, and this happens all the way from San Andreas up through the Hayward Fault in Northern California, all the way up here to the Juan de Fuca off the coast of Oregon and Washington, and all the way up to Alaska. That there is side-by-side movement that's occurring. It's obvious. Okay, it is laterally moving, not going up and down. It is just going side by side, all the way down the coast. And you can see the fault zones, and they even measure the side-by-side movement on the faults to determine, there's inches of movement a year sometimes that just slow slip, that, these plates just slowly pass by each other, okay? And where they snag, sometimes there's building pressure, okay? And that releases when they snag and build and build and build. Finally, it snaps, and that short snap is the earthquake on the fault zones that everybody's worried about, especially in Southern California. Well, part of the plate has to be moving towards Alaska in order for the other part of the plate to be moving in the southeast. The other part of the plate has to be moving to the northwest. And the plate is, no doubt about it, moving to the southeast. And they did new measurements here in the northwest. The whole region around Yellowstone, for example, I want to say moved something like 4 or 5 inches in 3 months' time to the east-southeast. The whole region. So the roads, the buildings, everything. The whole plate moved underneath and at the surface by multiple inches and rose by multiple inches in just a few months' time to the southeast. So up here to down here. Okay? When at the same time that happened, we had a whole bunch of mountain collapses here along the western Wyoming border. You might remember that. The mountain split in half near Jackson Hole. There was a big landslide in western Colorado, a multiple mile long landslide or ground burst, whatever you want to call it. All the fracking operations started getting hit more. The whole plate is moving to the east-southeast, North American plate. Well, that means that at some point or another, the Pacific plate is moving in the opposite direction, at least in this portion right here. But they're connected, so you got to wonder, is the North American plate, again, the craton goes all the way up here to the north, up through Alaska. The mountain ranges connect to the craton to the south, but it goes all the way up here. But we're talking about 2 different plates. So it could very well be that lateral movement is shifting back and forth like broken pieces of ice floating on top of a lake. But the lake we're floating on top of course, is a liquid magma lake with semi-liquid magma, more like slushy, floating on top of that slush that allows for that lateral movement to occur. But the whole plate tectonic theory about subduction, the Cascadia subduction zone, it's my contention there is no subduction happening at all. It never has. That's a fairy tale that they created. And they base it on some seismic measurements of bouncing waves off of supposedly curved plate or something. It's foolishness. It's kind of like the core of the earth being solid. That's just dumb. And, at this point, I'm not, I would debate on it after I write my book. I will debate on the topic. So, if professionals want to come step in, we can go like toe to toe and we can duke it out over whether or not the core of the Earth is plasma or plate tectonics is accurate. But I do not think that there's any subduction going on. There's rise happening from down below, but that's coming from the asthenosphere pushing right up on the plate. It's not coming from a plate pushing up on a plate. There is no plate going underneath the plate. That if there is a curvature that they're seeing, that's the curvature of the actual asthenosphere, which turns it all on its head, right? But I should write my own textbook at this point because I can tell you that there's so much BS in the textbooks that it's not, you wouldn't believe it. Okay, wake up as soon as possible. Question, Dutch, if you see this, is there or are there reasons the USGS is reporting explosions? Is it well, you know what? It could be for the mining for gold. Okay, well, yes. Somebody reported to me though that it was. See, this is great. It's like when the plumes happened at Pisgah craters. People said there were wildfires. People said it was this and that, and everybody in the world said it was this. People said it was the road department in Washington doing controlled blasts for regular road maintenance all on the same day, and that they deployed a whole bunch of teams of people out with explosives to go blow up along the ranges. I'm like, I mean, it's possible. I didn't even bother to look it up. I don't care. I assume they were all fake. Just because Vidali's there. I don't trust the information. I report the information out of the Pacific Northwest with extreme skepticism. Almost like they're playing a joke on the public. I'm not joking about that. I think they would do that. I think they have done it. I think they have no respect for the public. I think they have no respect for fellow mankind. I think they're total jerks after what they did to me. And if you don't know what the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network did to me and the professor and all those people, we won't even go into it. Just to say, that information's suspect, to say the least. But if it is real, then there were a series of explosions that occurred all in one day's time. Didn't occur today. Now there's just 2.0 earthquakes relatively in the same area, which is really interesting because yesterday there were explosions. Today they're deep 2.0 earthquakes. Same spots. So, I hope that answers the question. That can't really answer the question because the risk in the Cascadia zone and what's my assessment of it, there's building pressure there for sure. It's a sticking spot. And it's a spot where we've seen silence, but that silence, again, is suspect. There's probably been fives that have struck there off the coast in the past several weeks. Old boy just hasn't reported them. They're in collusion. And if they're not, then nothing struck, and then it's completely silent for months, which means that there's going to be a huge earthquake at some point. I mean, which is it? I don't know. I really don't know. And I know when I go check the charts, those charts are coming from the same people who are trolling. So, again, do you trust the information from a liar? They said all kinds of lies about me personally, to me, came to my pages and made up lies about me and said that I'm a terror promoter for clickbait and I'm doing this for money and popularity. When you guys know you don't get popular for reporting earthquakes, and I make the equivalent of a part-time dishwasher. Even with the fundraisers. So if they're liars like that, then what else are they lying about? Well, everything. Obviously, they say earthquakes can't be forecasted. They say earthquakes aren't related to one another over a small distance or a long distance. They denied deep earthquakes cause shallow earthquakes. And the reason they said any of that is because I said it first. But. All right, let's get down the list and ask some more questions, answer some. North toward Oregon. Okay, Kirsten B. Question. Do you think the Cali earthquakes will continue moving north to Oregon, which seems to be the silent area of the West Coast? Yes. We will see an earthquake most likely strike, and I'm going to be doing this in the earthquake forecast, so I really don't want to get ahead of myself too much, but Yes, there will be, in this next 7 days, there's going to be a new earthquake which is going to strike off the coast of Oregon and off the coast of Northwest California. In addition to the earthquake that's going to strike at the border of Southern California and Nevada in the 4 range. So we're going to have a busy week over the next several days. No doubt about it. I'll get into that in the forecast. But yes, we will see the earthquakes progress up the coast. They already are. It doubled, smaller earthquakes doubled in number. Yesterday we looked at like 40 on the map, and today it was something like 70. So, and those are numbers I'm pulling out of my rear because I didn't look at the numbers, but I can just tell you, looking at the number wise, it was double. And it's going right up the coast. So that means the next stop, the backfilling pressure, let's get back over and show you this. The backfilling pressure that comes from down here eventually releases up here. So first it gives way at the weak spots down here to the southeast as it's pushing. It's pushing down here to the southeast, it hits these spots, it releases at these spots, and eventually when these spots can't take it anymore, it backfills up the coast and immediately releases with a larger earthquake. That then pushes to the east, like it did this past week when the 4.6 struck here. 4.6 struck off the coast of Oregon, and then that was immediately followed within 12 hours by a 4.3 in Yellowstone, and then another 4.0 in Yellowstone to the east. And then it went down here to the south, the fracking operations here, and then went back up the east coast and caused a 3.3 up in the northeast, which we can't see on the map here now because it struck in Ontario, Canada. So, I hope that answers the question. Coast of Oregon definitely will be hit. Will be hit this week. We'll be hit with that mid-4, most likely, right off the coast. If it goes any higher, if it goes into that 5.0 range, I'll be surprised. I mean, I'll have to issue a correction, but I'm basing that on the activity we see now happening in the West Pacific. New deep earthquakes, new 5s starting to pick up, spreading out, and we're going to have to also touch on really quick. Look where we're struck. Okay, check it out. It's been how long since we've seen an earthquake in Russia and China? Very, very, very long time. It's been you guys have watched the map up here. You've known for at least the last several weeks that you've been watching with me. You know that we haven't seen any earthquake up here at all. Not even a small one, nothing. And now 5.0, 4.4, striking along, and this is north of the Himalayan range, north of Nepal. We've been looking for activity down here to see it strike up here, but what happened in the last day, guys? Oh, I don't know. 2 deep 4.0 earthquakes in North Japan, just west of Japan, and we said to watch to the west for movement off that. You remember? Just in the deleted forecast that I did last night, the 40-minute long update where I'm like, hey, the USGS is not showing us the 4.0 that struck here, but here it is on the EMS feed, and then I show this and I point over to the west and tell everybody to watch to the west. Still watching to the west. Now the west has been hit in a very, very rare area. Oh, now another earthquake has struck, 3.8. Wow. All right, well, let's go and answer another question. Heathen breathe fire. Dutch, as a general question, feel free to ignore if you have no position on the matter. Do you have any thoughts on esoteric technologies and experiments and locations? Oh. Yes. Oh, I've got thoughts on that. I sure do. I could really go down the list. We could go down the list. I could talk your ear off for 4 or 5 hours on everything under the sun. But, we could go all the way back to, did the ancient people have electricity? Did they? Could it be that all of history that we know is a lie? Could it? Do you really believe that... Do you believe that Benjamin Franklin discovered electricity? You know, the whole key on the kite thing? Yeah, man. Like, really, just think about this for a second. I want you to think about the Bible now for a second. Yeah, let's talk about ancient stuff for a second. The Bible. All right. The Bible has, I want you guys to go into Psalms 118, which is engraved on my wedding ring. The only reason I know this is because it's engraved on my ring, and it says something about, this is the day the Lord has made, let's rejoice and be glad in it, right? Great thing for getting engraved on the inside of your wedding ring. Really sentimental, really lovey-dovey. Well, one day I decided to actually go read the whole book of Psalm 118. And as I got through it, I found out that it's the longest book in the Bible. I didn't know that, right? Well, I'm going through it, and I'm Dutchsinise, right? Got to remember, I'm Dutchsinise. I see patterns in things, right? So I'm going through, and I read the first chapter, and then the second chapter, and third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, all the way to I'm at the 23rd, 24th chapter. And then I noticed something. In between each chapter, it says, this is a song, and then it says, like, it starts, the first one says, this is like a song to be sung by a lyre or whatever. It gives a little description of how it was supposed to be performed, I guess, because the Psalms are technically supposed to be sung. And I noticed that it said Aleph, and then that was the first psalm, and then it said Bethel, and then it said A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. The English alphabet is encoded in the Bible, straight up in your face. It's not even encoded. Go to Psalm 118, and you will see almost every letter of the English alphabet, as it's pronounced, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, named out in the book of Psalms to signify the starting of each psalm. Now that is crazy. That is crazy. Then you go back and look at the Old Testament, and I'm just talking here. This is just fun for me to talk about. I don't, whether or not it's true, I don't know. But I mean, I know for certain that the English language, the alphabet that we use today, is in the Bible, in Psalm 118. Go look. It'll blow your freaking mind. How did they do that? So, or who ripped it? Somebody ripped the English language. English language is ripped. Is it Psalm 119? I'm sorry, it carries over from Psalm 118 to Psalm 119. So start at 118, go into 119. What do we got? Earthquake. Oh, revised 2.3. Every time they revise an earthquake, you'll hear it ding for the number of revisions that they've made to it. So if it's like they adjust something like a mileage by 4 miles, then it'll ding 4 times. So the updates there's no way around that, but it just lets us know when they're screwing around with an earthquake. But okay, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it talks about the Ark of the Covenant, where the 10 Commandments were kept, right? And it was kept inside the tabernacle. And the tabernacle had to be built a certain way, and there was only certain guys that could wear certain things in the tabernacle, and the guys who carried the Ark of the Covenant had to wear special certain things that prevented them from getting killed by picking up the Ark and carrying it, and even looking at it or opening it or whatever. And they showed it in the Indiana Jones movie, the freaking dudes open it up and all the spirits fly out. It's not that. The Ark of the Covenant was known for discharging what they said was lightning, okay? Electricity. Now, do you find it odd? Now, an ark is something that you put something in, all right? But the same, okay, that's A-R-K. But A-R-C, and A-R-C is an arc of electricity, okay? Electricity arcs, and you get a lightning bolt. Now, I find that very, very strange and odd that both would be named the same from the English language, but entirely different words. And I contend that maybe the translation of the Bible, or the use of the word of the Ark of the Covenant, was a dual entendre that was used at some point as code speak. And that lightning bolts coming out of the Ark of the Covenant means that there was electricity. It means an electrical arc. It means that the guys who were especially carrying it, the Levite priests, who had to wear the special garments, were wearing those special garments because it shielded them from the electrical current. And that the tabernacle had to be built out of acacia wood, because a wood, an insulator, and the electrical current, if you would have had a metal tabernacle or metal poles in there, all of a sudden you would see what happens with a Tesla coil. You know, when a Tesla coil discharges and you've got a cage around it, the arc goes out to the metal, and then it hits the metal, and it'll heat it up, charge it, it'll electrocute you. All right? So clearly, the Bible is code speak for the English language. I discovered that myself. That's my own discovery. I went and looked online. I couldn't find anybody else talking about it, that the English language is encoded in the Psalms. Psalm 118, 119. Go into Psalms 118, 119. Read it, and you'll see the freaking A, B, C, D, and you'll be like, whoa. And there's just a few variations. Like, you could tell somebody, like, switched, like, the A and the I, or the H and the I together. I mean, it's just like, it's so mind-blowingly weird that that's in there. So with the ancient technologies, I can tell you this: lightning bolts coming out of something that's reported from I mean, there was a quest by other empires to get this thing. They wanted it, okay? There was like a fight over it from big, not just small little tribes, big empires like the Babylonian Empire wanted to get a hold of this thing. There was something to that. And then you go back and wonder, okay, well, if they had electricity, then the ancient Egyptians, you know, they say they didn't have power tools, and, you know, we could talk about frequency and vibration used to move heavy objects. You ever see your cell phone move across the table when it vibrates? Ever vibrate your cell phone across the table and have it fall off? Or almost fall off? Like, oh shit, my cell phone's vibrating towards the edge of the table. Oh no, like somebody got to keep calling me, right? Well, I propose that it would be easy to move heavy objects using certain harmonic vibrations, and that it wouldn't be too hard to get a large rock vibrating like your cell phone would, and your cell phone will defy gravity and go, and even though it might weigh a little bit, will go right across that surface. And they have sandy surfaces already, sandy on top of rock in Egypt. Well, there's your vibration source right there. You could vibrate that sucker right across using the grains of sand as your small little wheels underneath the rock, and you can move the rock. That's ancient technology right there. And that could totally explain it. Now, as for lifting it, I don't know. Maybe that's what you need all the slaves for. Lifting. Not dragging, just straight up lifting. Heave ho, heave ho. I don't know. I don't know. Explanations on that stuff. When we build the time machine, we'll all go back together and figure it out. Let's get to the next question. Frequency and vibration also heals. No need for big pharma. Funny you mention that. I've got an invention. A way to, and this is like, somebody really needs to look into this. I have an uncle who's in the medical industry and medical field, and told him about this, and he was intrigued, but it would take a couple $1 million in research to actually get this done, but I know it'll work. Which is, okay, we already know that most viruses have what are actually rigid shells, so to speak, exoskeletons almost, where the hard virus is actually long, elongated, and has ways to break into the softer cells of the human body. There's all different shapes of viruses, but there are in different shapes, geometric shapes. Every virus takes on some form of geometric shape. Kind of strange, right? I contend that there should be a way to resonate a frequency through someone's body at such a harmonic to match the harmonic of the virus without matching the harmonic of the human cell. In other words, because the rigidity of the virus is greater than the rigidity of the softer cell, that you could tune in a frequency and shatter the virus like a woman, you know the saying, or you maybe you've seen a commercial or something, where the woman goes, oh, and she fractures the glass with her voice. You could do the same thing using ultrasound. Now think about this. You could fracture a virus using ultrasound in a person's body, and then the antibodies attack the virus once it's vulnerable. And then your body makes an antibody for that virus, and you're able to cure the common cold, cure AIDS, cure any virus, Ebola, any one of them. If it's a virus, you can fracture it. And you can fracture it with frequency. It's just a matter of putting those viruses in a dish next to a human cell, tuning it in, and figuring out what frequency virus responds to. And then you would just step inside of a booth, resonate your whole body, and because it's only hitting the frequency that will kill the virus and not hitting the frequency that will kill the cell, you'll be okay. And it'll be like basically vibrating the hell out of the virus until it fractures. And as soon as it fractures, your body starts able to produce an antibody to it, and all of a sudden viruses become a thing of the past. There you go. Just cured AIDS for everybody, and guess what they'll do? Ignore it or steal it, one of the two. All right. Yeah, but this cure for the common cold would be a real cure for the common cold. Like, you would step inside of a booth, it would bombard you with ultrasound, the same thing that they use to look at babies inside of a mother's womb. So, I mean, it would be a little bit more powerful, or you could target it. That would be the other thing, is just basically use the same ultrasound device that they use for looking at babies and tune it to the frequency of the virus, and then slowly move it all throughout your whole, up and down your arms and your legs and everything. It wouldn't need to be one big transmitter. It could be a handheld wand that goes through and slowly, maybe it would only need to fracture a few of the virus cells, and then it would make an antibody immediately that would kill the rest of the viruses in your body, right? So, there we go. And you know what? Theoretically, it should work on germs too. We know ultraviolet light will kill germs on surfaces. So if you have a powerful UV light, I don't know if you guys know this, but UV light kills germs. And they even use UV light to kill some viruses. Ebola is sensitive to UV light. So you get a UV light sterilizer. They sell them online for $1,000. They're really powerful, and you place it in a room for 30 minutes, and the surfaces, everywhere where the light touches, the surface is sterilized. So, yeah. Yeah, bacteria and some germs and some viruses. They used it for Ebola. That kind of says, okay, hold on. Maybe they can't use it for viruses. And the fact that they used it for Ebola in the airplanes, they used it in the airplanes they transferred the people with Ebola, right, to here to the States. Well, if it only work on bacteria, what the fuck were they using it in the freaking plane for? Okay. Yeah, St. Helens. St. Helens. Oh yeah. They're all I said that yesterday in the broadcast about the explosions. Wake up as soon as possible says Dutch. I looked on Google Earth, took the earthquake info on the explosions, and some are about 10 miles away from Mount St. Helens. What the hell? Do you see any quarry there? Yeah. Do you see a quarry there? I don't see a quarry there. Yeah, Rife frequencies. I've heard about Rife. I've seen some really cool videos on YouTube where a guy is using plasma tubes and plasma balls to make his own Rife frequencies. Yeah, there is no quarry there. So those explosions are just out in the woods. Boom! I'm not buying it, man. Those guys up in the Northwest are shysters. They are. That guy, I don't know what his deal is. The professor. All right, let's get down the list. Any other questions? Let's see. Dutch. Okay, Pam Harder asks, Dutch, could the huge sunspot be causing increased earthquakes? Most definitely if the solar wind is facing Earth. If we have a strong solar wind or a solar flare or an incoming CME, that can have an earthquake effect. And the way it happens is, it's actually pretty simple. The sun spits out particles or charged solar winds, which are again containing particles in the solar wind, which hits the Earth's magnetosphere. That then causes an interaction, a power exchange between the particles and the Earth's magnetosphere. The Earth's magnetosphere deflects, but absorbs as well a lot of that, whatever hits the Earth, I should say. That then is taken to ground. It follows the magnetic curvature lines of the Earth down to the North and South Pole, and comes into the Earth and goes down inside of the Earth, where it then goes down to the core of the Earth, which is not solid like everybody has been taught for the last God knows how long. That at the center of the Earth there is a plasma, a rotating or oscillating, like electricity, oscillating, but it's rotating really fast, ball of plasma. Something hot enough to melt everything down there. And it's being fed by particles, particle feeding, which turns to DC power, by the way. When particles hit the upper ionosphere, they convert naturally into DC power, which goes to ground. Same thing, everything that goes to ground turns to DC power and goes to ground. So if we have frequency, let's say we're pumping something out from a radio station, that FM wave goes off out into the distance, and they would have you believe that the wave just dissipates. Some of it goes out into space, some of it hits the ground. But where does it go? Well, over time, over space, it just gets less. Well, it doesn't just get less, it gets absorbed by the Earth's magnetic field. So if you imagine a radio station being sent out in all directions, and then at a certain distance those waves disappear, they don't disappear. They turn to DC power and go to ground. And so you can imagine that humans can have the same effect that the sun can, right? And it's all going down to ground at the bottom of the Earth, which is, at the center of the Earth, which is the plasma core. Plasma core, nothing more than a giant plasma torch being fed by the sun and by particles from other events. I mean, it's not just the sun. I'm sure a gamma ray burst from another portion of our universe or from our galaxy, or even from another spot in the universe might affect Earth, could have an incoming effect somehow on our core. It just depends on the power incoming, but for certain the sun. And we see it happen. Now get this, it usually takes 2 to 3 days from the time that a actual physical particle interaction exits the sun and hits the Earth. So there's like a 2 to 3 day lag time from the time that you see a coronal hole facing Earth and that wind starts coming towards us to the time where the wind actually hits. When the wind actually hits, that's the time when the earthquakes pick up. Same with flares, same with CMEs. Always 2 to 3 days afterwards. It takes that long for the particles to physically travel from the sun to Earth. Not talking about the light. We're talking about the actual physical, actual particle, energy, actual small ions of energy being sent out from the sun. Charged particles that take 2 to 3 days to physically travel here from the sun. Now, somebody could probably calculate the speed off that. I'm not going to bother. We'd have to do it off parallax geometry and figure out how far away the sun is to begin with, and I don't even trust that number. But whatever that number is, however long it does take, it takes 2 days for it to get here from the sun. We've seen it time and time again. Sometimes 3. If it's like a more outward CME blast, kind of a lofty poof of a blast, as opposed to one of those really sudden, long arms that snap off, that can be a really fast traveling CME versus, and then the solar wind is pretty steady. The coronal holes, when they come around and you've got the solar wind coming at us, of course that does the same thing. And we get, when the wind picks up, that's when the charged particles are hitting the Earth heavier at the poles, and we start to see that air glow up in the North Pole, the aurora borealis, and down at the South Pole as well. We start to see that glow. Well, that glow is itself charged energy that goes to ground eventually. Those don't just fade away out into space. They fade away and float down to the core of the Earth. And all that power is huge. And you see an earthquake increase right after. I mean, come on. You put 2 and 2 together. People have been noticing this all the way back to Solar Observer and astrophotometry back 2010, 2011. Before the big solar guy on YouTube now, he kind of ripped them off. But, astrophotometry first proposed that it was coronal holes, and Solar Observer from down in Australia first made the proposal that coronal holes were causing earthquakes. And at the time, back in 2010, everybody except for me and a few other people denied it, said it wasn't possible. And they did the appropriate documentation, then they got ripped off. So, anyways, let's get into the next earthquake question.
Um, Dutch, we just had a 2.5 earthquake at your underwater volcano off of Catalina Island, 1 kilometer deep. Your house shook. Nice. Okay, well, let's go see what's going on there. Catalina, I've been there. Well, I'll be danged. USGS isn't reporting it. Let's go check another feed here. Hold on. Oh, no, they are showing it. Okay, they're showing it just a little bit south. Ah, Catalina, sorry, oh my god. Yeah, awesome place. Absolutely fabulous. Really cool people. Um, yeah, Southern California, what can I say? It's carrying on. Let me go ahead and turn on the last 24 hours again. In the update, we kind of talked about it, the swarm being half of what it was, but just as we'd expect, it's now spreading out. And so Santa Catalina and the areas up the coast being struck, central Nevada being struck, well, that's just what we were expecting. I hate to say it. I know I sound like a broken record. What we were expecting, guys, but it is. It's transferring up the coast. We're seeing it go laterally outwards. The swarm's being cut in half, and if we do see a larger earthquake, the swarm will kick back up. There's no doubt about it. So hope that it doesn't happen. I hope we're done. I'm tired of reporting on it. I want it to go away, but you can see it. It's still carrying on. Oh, and the pumping operation to the north. We're all concerned about the operation to the south with Salton Sea, but what about Clear Lake and geysers? It's been going nonstop too. If you add in that, it's been like 4,000 earthquakes in the last week on the West Coast. It's been an insane number of earthquakes on the West Coast over the last several days. Something's going on. We are building into larger movement, which again I'm going to go into in the forecast, which I got to do in a minute here, and I'll answer a few more questions. I've been going for like an hour now. Michael Wood, what happens, Dutch, when the plasma core flips its field and no longer drains anything in its field? Okay, this is something really interesting. The sun, a year ago, went quadrupolar. Do you remember this? I did a whole story on it. Several people did. They were forecasting that the sun was going to go through its normal cycle flip from north to south, where the poles flip on the sun on the interior, which proof again that the sun's core is plasma, right? We're talking about a magnetic field on the inside of the core of the sun flipping. Well, when it did, it flipped and it split. So there's two norths, two souths. Now, what did that do to the sun? Right? It didn't do anything to the sun. So the Earth's core, I believe, would do the same thing. That the plasma core flipping is a matter of a magnetic flip. So the only thing that would change would be the power input would be coming in instead of, let's say, at the North Pole, it would be coming in at the South Pole. Or if it's coming in at the South Pole, it would come in at the North Pole. And I contend that it's coming in at the South Pole and at the North Pole at the same time, so it's kind of already quadrupolar. And I think that's why we see ice cap buildup in colder regions around the perimeters of the planet now than in the past. Just a contention of mine. I intend to more prove the plasma core of the Earth stuff over the summer after I do my experiment. Once I recreate the magnetic field of the Earth in a laboratory setting and it's visible to you guys using plasma, I think I'm going to be well on my way to proving that the core of the Earth is plasma. How does the sun continue to burn? Is there oxygen? Okay, technically it's not burning. That's the craziest thing of all. The sun is not burning. So really there is no fire occurring, and it's not oxygen that you're seeing consume on the sun. Instead, and this goes into some controversial thought about what the sun is made out of, science says Modern science says that it's hydrogen, and that the amount that's there is a fixed amount that's being burned off gradually, and that it's not a self-sustaining dynamo, and that it's basically just one big glob of burning fuel, but it's not burning in the sense of fire. It's, well, it's like, well, gosh, I don't even know how to describe this. Well, there's been a debate on this. See, okay, goddamn, I hate this, because the science that we use is so flawed and so wrong that they're correcting it all the time. So everything I would tell you about the sun being a nuclear furnace, that's the old science that's now been proved wrong. And they've just replaced all this in the past few months. Well, at least over the last year, saying that the sun is not a nuclear furnace anymore. And that there's a quantum cause. It gets really complex and convoluted. That there's a quantum cause, and that there may be strange-lit interaction happening at the core of the sun, which is allowing for the sun to carry on and burn. It's not a furnace of any kind of nuclear that we can understand, that there's some quantum play at physics that's allowing for the sun to carry on. In other words, nobody frickin' knows. And is it burning? Well, it looks like fire, but it's not. Technically, those are shards of plasma and plasma energy, superheated particles coming off of a non-burning yet consuming ball of hydrogen that's supposedly not on fire but is on fire. How do you describe something that's burning that's not burning? I'm just reading comments here. Like everybody's like, "Oh, dude, yeah, God knows, LOL." Yeah, I mean, dude, welcome to the world of astronomy. Now, if I were a big solar channel, I would pull out some BS about angstroms and tell you some other stuff and make up some convoluted words and make it sound like there's a good answer. But I'm telling you that they are changing that stuff all the time, and that the sun, I would say that it is burning, but that there is no oxygen there, so it's some kind of explosion. But it's an ongoing explosion, a self-sustaining dynamo, which then flies in the face of everything they ever said about it. And that really the core of the sun is plasma energy, just like the core of the earth. And plasma energy, of course, can be a self-sustaining dynamo. The solar system itself would be powering the self-sustaining dynamo of the sun. So imagine the electron cascade that would occur off all the planets rotating around this central object. I mean, just like the core of the Earth, we've got a rotating plasma at the center of it. Well, the rotating core of the center of the solar system must also be plasma, right? So what's feeding it? Well, the greater universe, the greater galaxy, whatever our portion is in the surrounding galaxy cluster. Maybe other galaxies nearby also exchanging energy with ours. Just all suppositions on my part. I'm not a cosmologist, obviously. I'm not an astronomer, so, take it for what you will. But I can tell you this, that the sun, the whole story of the sun, just like the whole story of the Earth, has to be incorrect. Must be incorrect. There's so many things about it that don't fit the current models that it just means that everything we know about the sun is wrong too, and more research needs to be done. You need to question everything you currently know about it. Start to ask the important questions like, how can something burn without burning, without being on exploding? There must be something else at play here, which then goes back into plasma and the powerful magnetic currents that come out of the sun, which they would have us believe emanate from the surface. But I would contend that those have a correspond, like if you see a magnetic filament. Oh, we just had another earthquake. If you see a magnetic filament extending off the center of the sun or the top of the sun or the east or west limb of the sun, that must also go down into the sun. That it's not just spiraling up in a beautiful arc up above the sun, but you could also imagine going that equally down into the sun. And that it's connected at some point to something further down. And that is what is leading us to our bright light source coming from the sun, not just burning hydrogen. And again, how can something burn without oxygen? Well, technically it's not burning. All right, let's get into the next question, because I don't do solar. This is why. Yeah, another earthquake in California. I know, guys. It just keeps getting struck. As if we needed any more proof that something's going down. It just keeps getting struck over and over again. And the fact that they ignored the swarm, not a word. I'm not saying it's dead yet either. I mean, the swarm, if we get to, like, God, man, can you imagine if we're going in on 2 weeks and there's no warning issued? Something's got to happen. Something's got to give. Either an earthquake or a volcanic event or a geothermal event of some kind has to occur in this region. You don't see, well, now over 3,000 earthquakes. It was 2,700 earthquakes yesterday. Okay? So what do we got to say now? It's now nearing over the 3,000 mark since last week, just in that spot, which means that lateral movement has to occur somewhere nearby, and it's going to be bigger. And just hope that it's not a hope, pray, whatever you do, that it's not anything volcanic. It's the best I can say. Because I'm not for this hope stuff. I really like to know what's going on. And when I see a swarm like this still occurring, even though it's been cut in half since yesterday, the fact that it's still going on, day 8 going into day 9, and now look what's happening up the coast. This is just the last 24, guys. So, you know, in the past, over the past several weeks and months, when we see this kind of activity, it normally leads to larger movement. And if it strikes on land, man, everybody will freak. You know it, everybody will freak. Get a 5.0 earthquake on land, everybody just shits themselves. So let's hope it doesn't happen. Hope it happens out to sea. Hope, of course, that the volcano doesn't do anything more. And that swarm tomorrow is even cut in half from where it is now. If we get in here tomorrow, and this is, because again, we're looking at the last 24 hours, right? So this whole stack here. So if we get here tomorrow and this stack is half of what it was today, that'll make it half of what it was yesterday. So in other words, it would be halving and halving and half again. That would mean it was dying out. But if we get back in and it's doing more or doing the same, then you know it's carrying on. And it will carry on until it can't carry on anymore. It's just a matter of time. How long will it carry on for? The end result will be one of two things. Large earthquake, volcanic eruption. Those are the two. Okay? And the reason I say large earthquake is because you cannot see 3,000 earthquakes happen without seeing some kind of other lateral movement nearby. Does that make sense? I mean, you're not going to see a whole area show a huge amount of movement and then not see the area right next to it move within a few days. And usually the area next to it that's been silent, that hasn't moved. So where are we looking? I mean, where's an area that hasn't moved recently? Well, get up the coast a little bit here. Let's say Los Angeles, just north of Los Angeles, south of San Francisco, and then Gulf of California, all the way down to Mexico City. I mean, that whole region hasn't moved. So take it for what you will. It's a semi-warning before I put out my forecast. I'll get into details into that tonight. I'm going to break off out of here now. Guys, I want to do as many Q&As as I can. But again, I've got to get the earthquake forecast out tonight, and it's already 12:29 a.m. my time. It always takes me an hour to do it. It takes me an hour to process it. Then it takes half hour to upload. I'm going to be up late anyways. So, guys, much love. We'll do this again. I'll get more questions and answers in, and we'll also have a spot where you guys can submit questions to me so I can come back in and answer those. And I'm sorry this stuff isn't saving on my channel. I really wish it would. Because then we could just like come back and reference this. You guys can say, oh, he answered that question last week. You can just, here's the link. So, Father's Day. I'm not a father. Well, you know, I'm John Vidali's daddy, though. What's up? Who is your daddy and what does he do? Happy Father's Day to all the fathers that are out there, though. And to my own father, even though he's passed away, Dad, happy Father's Day. And to all of you who are listening who are fathers or prospective fathers, much love. Enjoy the day. Hopefully they'll do something for you. And again, guys, thanks for hanging in there and being on the live stream. It's always fun. I'll put some music back on, and I'll be back in if anything happens. Of course, I'll hear the computer ding, and I'll be running to it like a fireman running down. All I need is a pole to slide down, and I can just have the earthquake slide down pole, and I can come down to the lab and report on you as quick as possible. Much love. Have a good night, guys.